So here's my deal. I'm a lifelong 40-plus year Aston Villa fan who's desperate to see success, and I've never been closer in my life since the 80s. And I get gloomy and anxious as well when there's 4 straight losses on the bounce, not just because the general malaise that the club is in, but also people don't watch this show when Aston Villa loses, and I feel a sense of obligation to my title sponsor 24/7 Services to provide them with as many eyeballs as possible because of the support and belief they've shown in me. I'm also somebody, though, who's obsessed with seeking the truth through analysis, which is why I'll often watch a game a second time. You know, that first viewing, usually it's an emotional viewing. The amount of times I got wrong what I think I thought I saw proves that, you know, having another look is really, really important. And I have to tell you, I'm still incredibly positive about what's going on with us. But that game did give me clarity on a big issue that separates last year's team with this one. Lots to dissect, and presented by 24/7 Services, let's review Liverpool 2, Villa 0. Before I get into it, you know me, I'm not one who begs for subscribers on this channel. I believe that if you do something worthwhile and valuable, people will follow and support you. But the weird thing about the analytics of this channel is that more than half of those watching this show, or any of them for that matter, are not subscribers. Now, I understand people in my age bracket and above are very reluctant to become part of the Google machine, and you have to have a Google account in order to subscribe to any YouTube channel. So in reviewing this channel's analytics, half the viewers aren't subscribers and half the subscribers aren't viewing these videos, which is fine. But the more subscribers you have, the more likely it is on this platform that your videos will be promoted. So if I could just ask a favor, check to see if you are in fact subscribed. If you are, thank you. Another thing that often happens is that fans of the opposing team will watch these shows without necessarily subscribing and sometimes make silly taunts in the comments section, but others are quite complimentary, which I appreciate. That was the case with the Spurs game recently. And so the first big thing that we're going to have to come to grips with here in the wider scale of reviewing Saturday is that Liverpool is one of the best, if not the best team in Europe right now, and they are my heavy favorites to win the Premier League. And having watched them numerous times now already this season, Arne Slot has come in and done a couple of very Unai Emery-like things to become more pragmatic. This Liverpool team is just far more composed. That's obvious. Less chaotic, more patient. They were happy to just control the game with a lead as Villa stood off. And I think that's going to have a couple of outcomes. First of all, they'll be fresher in the long run rather than the Klopp teams that were pedal to the metal, heavy metal football all the time. And you remember how badly they fell off last year, especially after he announced his resignation. I think the team that wins the Premier League this year will have the fewest amount of games lost to injury. They will also have a great chance conversion ratio, and they won't concede goals needlessly. Well, that's Arne Slot's Liverpool right now. And finally, before we get into the meat of the matter, an incredible situation has occurred just in the last day with the release of a damning video featuring Saturday's referee, David Coote, displaying his utter contempt for Liverpool Football Club and specifically Jurgen Klopp.
Sorry, what?
Why any professional referee would tempt fate by even recording those comments in the first place is one thing. But why those comments were finally released now after all that time is one of many questions that needs to be answered. What makes this absolutely extraordinary in its timing is that on Saturday, Villa had 2 very contentious penalty decisions. The first of which was Ollie Watkins, who was contacted in the box, tumbled over, got straight back up again. But in my mind, there are only 2 outcomes here. It's a penalty or play on. If the referee felt that Watkins Watkins was embellishing, he should have been issued a yellow card. But does Watkins appeal here? Does he look towards the referee? No, he actually hops up and tries to retrieve the ball. The pundits on my Matchday Live panel included Michael Owen, among others. I can't remember who else, but they all unanimously agreed that was a penalty. And the reason is because Konate stepped into Ollie Watkins' lane and made contact with him without touching the ball. Now, the problem is, for such a big, strong guy, the way Ollie Watkins was launched can only be interpreted two ways. One, embellishment, and two, he was just caught perfectly off balance there. The end result, though, was a foul called against Watkins. Then, in the second half, a moment where VAR had to intervene, the ball was played towards Pau Torres, his shirt was tugged, and he tumbled over, not allowing him to make a play on the ball. And after a brief check, no penalty awarded. Later in the game, Boubacar Kamara tugged back a Liverpool player's shirt. It was a foul, and it was a yellow card. So different locations on the field, but virtually the exact same infraction. Once again, Michael Owen screaming, that was a stone-cold penalty. Unai Emery felt the same way, and rarely does he moan about refereeing decisions, but he says that's a penalty. And I'm really happy that Stan Collymore, who has connections to both clubs, absolutely publicly eviscerated the standard of refereeing in this game. So with the backdrop of this Coot video, let's think about the implications here. Imagine if he had awarded Aston Villa 2 penalties in that game, or even just 1. And then the video comes out where he basically shares his utter contempt for Liverpool. Well, now there is a perception that that bias is real and that it impacted the result of this game. That's bad enough. And he's suspended right now pending investigation. But what if he found out, because this sounds like an extortion attempt, really, you pay us this or we release that. What if he knew about this video coming out on Friday or Saturday? Because he would have been obligated to tell the Premier League so they could have put somebody else in charge of that game. Now, what if he was trying to actually shun those 2 decisions to make it look like he was actually favoring Liverpool, therefore denying the bias that he had in this video from 4 years ago? The whole thing stinks. Premier League refereeing has come under scrutiny and the microscope for so long now, and whether that's massive game-changing mistakes, inconsistency, lack of transparency, or the body's sudden propensity to alter the interpretation of a law in mid-season. Whatever it is, it's these issues that are preventing the Premier League from being the greatest league in the world. I've said that numerous times. I watch the Bundesliga a lot right now. I don't see this discrepancy in the standard of officiating in that league, and I don't hear about scandalous, game-changing decisions happening all the time to the point where somebody has to apologize for it. And as much as I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of thinking that refereeing can somehow further agendas through bias, the longer this incompetence carries on, it's getting harder to dismiss that idea, especially when you consider the massive amounts of money that are at stake in the Premier League enterprise. Well, that was one of the longer prologues I've had to the Holy Trinity show, which explores the 3 key issues and moments that defined Liverpool 2, Aston Villa 0, and I will not hide my admiration for the club and for Anfield. It is definitely a bucket list place to go. Samir made the journey wearing his Henson hoodie, which you too could own by visiting divisionretro.com. And Samir made a very interesting point as we messaged each other afterwards. One of the reasons he's dialing back the away games is precisely because of the refereeing decisions that seem to favor home teams or big clubs, thus impacting games. Hard enough winning at Anfield. When you're seemingly playing against 12, it's a lot of investment and time leading to disappointment. The key numbers were really surprising to me. XG did not reflect the big chances we apparently created. Whoever was responsible for keeping track gave Villa 5 big chances. I mean, I remember a couple, but not 5. That was more than Liverpool. When you look at touches in the opposing box, we had just 2 fewer than the hosts. This game came down to a couple of very simple issues, one being the ability to convert a chance. You cannot win Premier League matches if you can only hit the target twice from 12 attempts. That's not good enough, and it's been an issue during this poor run of results. I cannot stand unhinged hysterics, and I know generally that's not you, but if you go to some of the Aston Villa Facebook sites, all of which I've had to leave, by the way, you will find those people actually questioning whether Unai Emery is even the right man for this job. And if that is you, this show is not for you, because I'm not going to indulge that kind of nonsensical hysteria. Saturday was Unai Emery's 100th game in charge of Aston Villa. I predict he will have at least 200 more games in charge of our football club. He could have had the pick of any club in the world that he wanted, but he chose ours. I don't know why. Was it timing? Was it the project in general? Was it the sales job by Nassif Sawiris? Or was it the fact that he was going to get full autonomy? The fact is, he's probably overqualified for Aston Villa, but he chose us, and we need to be forever grateful, even after a 4-game slide. The 24/7 services team is also a little down in the dumps over this recent run of results, but they don't have time to dwell on things like that. They have to focus on being awesome at the job site. And one of the things that makes Paul Handsaker's family-founded and run company so interesting is just the diverse nature of the projects. Like, for example, you have the essential industrial functional type projects like installing lead aprons at the co-op in Starbeck. And while this may look and seem simple, it's not. You need to know what you're doing in order for this building to stay watertight while also extending the lifespan of the roof. Then you have the residential and commercial beautification work. This is Painter Jay's jam. For example, this is a recent project in Four Oaks. And just look at how tall the ceilings are here and how big the space is, and also how awkward the angles are. I mean, you need a professional who understands scaffolding, properly draping the floors, patching the walls correctly, so at the end of this, it looks like a brand new build. And that's not even including color selection, because colors change as the light changes in your house. And this is where Jay has that feel as he's working with you. If you've already used 24/7 services, thank you, because you're indirectly supporting this show. But if you are ready, all you have to do is visit their website for the phone numbers, or you can find them in the description of these videos. Big issue number 3 was rancid refereeing, but because I already covered that ad nauseum, let's skip straight ahead to big issue number 2, set piece susceptibility. I can guarantee you 100% that, like at Tottenham, Unai Emery was absolutely adamant about not getting into a back-and-forth type game, a transitional type affair, because of Liverpool's ruthlessness on the counter. And here's where we need to have some encouragement. Villa got its game plan absolutely spot on in that regard, because the Reds did not create heart-skipping opportunities from open play or after long periods of possession. They're called cliches because there's an element of truth or consistency to them. And so often in football, teams are caught while on attacking set-piece duty. Sure enough, that happened to us on 3 separate occasions in this game. Liverpool are the head and shoulders title favorites in the Premier League because they're not conceding goals, and then they are punishing teams on the break. Aston Villa can't keep a clean sheet, and they are not ruthless enough in front of goal. On the 1-0 goal, I simply cannot understand the logic behind attempting to play a low ball to the near post. Was that the idea? Because if it was, I have some questions for Austin McPhee. Now, if this is just a matter of a really poorly executed ball, well, okay. But you don't need to be a UEFA Pro license holder to know that against a devastating counter-attacking team that is looking for precisely these kinds of moments, playing a low ball to the near post might not be a good idea. Upon reflection, it was probably a good thing that David Coote played the advantage in this moment, which kind of goes against the corruption narrative based on his video coming out. But had he stopped play there for Leon Bailey mugging Mo Salah, Bailey likely would have been sent off. Now, this Darwin Núñez is a punishing, ruthless striker. Believe it or not, we would concede another chance, also from an attacking set piece, where Nunez was involved again. But this is the other Nunez, the one that Liverpool supporters bemoan at times. Just prior to the 2-0 goal, you could say this was an attacking set piece because it was an attacking throw-in 15 yards up from the corner flag in Liverpool territory. And now here comes an issue that has driven me nuts all season long. It's happening too often. And in this case, it's Pau Torres falling to the floor so softly, presumably to try and draw a foul. Unfortunately for Pau, there's video everywhere, and we could plainly see there is nothing closely resembling a foul. So instead of staying on his feet and maybe contesting that ball and keeping us in possession, we now have the boy who cried wolf syndrome. Players going down so easy trying to draw penalties, then when a legitimate one comes along, referees who've kept notes and taken names go, nah, you've got a reputation for being soft. And that drives me nuts. It's embarrassing. After that, though, another break into acres of space as Villa is all pushed up chasing the equalizer, and this goal could have been snuffed out with Diego Carlos simply nodding it into touch. Instead, he nods it to a player who had already scored 6 goals against Emi Martinez and Aston Villa. This would have been goal number 7, and there we see beautifully why Unai Emery is reluctant to play the high-risk, high-reward type transitional game, because he simply does not have the types of defenders capable of playing in that kind of game. And the number one big issue facing Aston Villa right now, but also that defined Liverpool 2, Villa 0, Rodgers' re-education. Bear with me for a moment, but I just blasted through season 1 of Mission to Burnley. What an insightful, interesting, and timely series for me. It's called Mission to Burnley because the American owners of that club are all devout Mormons from the state of Utah. And Alan Pace, the chairman's dad, was once a missionary in Lancashire. That's how the whole thing kind of started. Now, I don't think I need to give you a spoiler alert here, but season 1 was about Burnley's relegation to the championship, the hiring of Vincent Kompany, the retooling of the roster, and then the romp to a championship title. I haven't seen season 2 yet, but based on season 1, my impression of Vincent Kompany completely changed, and I can understand now why he may one day be an elite manager in this game and have some success, because he's a natural leader and the players want to follow him. Not to mention he has a very clear game model, and more importantly, he knows how to onboard new players. And you'll recall after relegation that season, Burnley completely overhauled the roster with a whole bunch of new faces coming in, including Ian Matson, who was integral in the romp to the championship, which was the 6th most points ever earned by a team en route to the title. But it didn't start that way. Here's where I'm going with this. In a meeting with the owners, Kompany had to tell them about the plans of adapting new players. And they had a lot of new players, including some very young ones. And he said it would take a certain amount of days, and he actually gave them a number of meetings, video reviews, and then training sessions until they got to where he thought they'd be ready to really start going. And sure enough, almost to the amount of days he gave them, the graph showed results going this way, sharply, dramatically, and they just kept going in that direction. So here we have Morgan Rodgers at 22 years of age, literally learning on the job in the Premier League, one of the most intricate and nuanced positions in an Unai Emery side, the number 10 or the second striker behind Ollie Watkins. Last year, he was playing more on the left in the absence of Jacob Ramsey, and Moussa Diaby was playing that role in behind Watkins. And I'm sure you also recall at the beginning of last year, Watkins and Diaby combined for more goals than any other partnership in the Premier League. Now, Diaby's a couple of years older than Rodgers. I think he's slightly more accomplished in terms of an all-round footballer, national team member as well. And he started last year really well, and I think ended it well too. And remember, he was also adapting to this new role at Villa with Unai Emery, because previously he'd been playing wider at Bayer Leverkusen. Diaby's definitely quicker than Rodgers and certainly more clinical in front of goal, and this is where Morgan Rodgers really has to improve. and quickly, I feel, because in the last 5 games, he's had a number of big chances which he's missed, including this one. Like, he got his bearings at Anfield here completely wrong. Imagine what this goal might have meant to the game. And considering we spent, allegedly, most of last summer courting Joao Felix, that just validates my sense that Unai Emery is adamant about having the right kind of player in that role with a little bit of experience, obviously talent, the ability to set up Ollie Watkins, the ability to score goals by playing off of Ollie Watkins, having some defensive sensibilities as well. But the point remains, it is a crucial player in his system. And now poor Joao Felix has been relegated to a depth player who plays Conference League when he could have been playing Champions League with us. Morgan Rogers' 3 goals and 2 assists is not a bad haul at this point, but when you think about all the chances that either he or Ollie Watkins have not buried, it could be a whole lot higher. The other aspect of Rogers' profile that's really important to us is his defensive actions, and here's where I think he actually may have a little bit of an edge on Moussa Diaby, partially because of Morgan's game IQ, but also just his physical stature. You know, you have to keep the ball in the middle of that park, because if you turn it over, the other team's on the counter, and you also have to manage their number 6 type. And what's been happening of late, you've probably noticed this as well. He carries the ball when maybe it would have been smarter to release it, and there have been times when he releases the ball early rather than maybe beating that first man to open up more space. Remember, this is a 22-year-old learning on the job in the Premier League. I'm willing to give him time, and so is the club, because apparently they're about to give him a contract extension. Ollie Watkins looks a very frustrated individual right now. He's not scoring goals. He's not getting penalty decisions. He's not combining effortlessly with Morgan Rogers the way he did with Moussa Diaby. But to bring it all the way back around to Vincent Kompany and Burnley, he figured it would take X amount of days, I believe it was 100, to fill his players full of information, training, video, meetings, to the point where they reached automation, where actions were automatic. And on November the 5th of that year, they were hammered 5-2 at Bramall Lane. They did not lose again until April 22nd. So it has now been 102 days for Aston Villa since August the 1st. And Morgan Rogers has been given the mantle because Unai Emery believes in his willingness to learn, his positive mental attitude, and he thinks this player will get there in the end. But think about that time frame for a moment. I think it's coming. We just have to be patient, because when it does, could be good. The Sill Hill Brewery star performer, in my humble opinion, was Jacob Ramsey, who looked sharp, lively, and difficult to dispossess until, unfortunately, he had to hobble off with an injury, which is exactly what we didn't need right now. Before that, though, he had a strong game, went 10 for 12 on completed passes, 3 for 5 on ground duels. He recovered the ball 3 times, and he was successful on both of his dribbling attempts. Now, if JJ were to take his credentials from Brugge and bring them to the Sill Hill Taproom in Aston and say, I was part of that debacle in Brugge, well, JJ might have been able to sample a beautifully crafted and award-winning Birmingham brew right up to a night with European champions on Friday, November 29th. I've put a link to tickets for that event in the description of this video. Just quickly updating the categories I like to track throughout the season. The away record suffers. Watkins and Duran stuck on 9 goals through 11 games. In the 15-minute increments of the game, Villa look vulnerable in the middle thirds of each half, and we've now conceded as many as we've scored in that final 15 minutes. The fouls evened right out after that game because Villa was called for more, and each team was caught offside only once. Next up, Crystal Palace at Villa Park, a team that is now in the relegation places, thanks to Ipswich Town winning its first Premier League game of the season at Tottenham of all places. So Spurs beat City in the Cup and us the following weekend, but before then they lost to Palace and now lost to Ipswich Town, two teams at the bottom of the table. The Premier League is weird and wild. 4 points separate third from 13th, and had we not conceded late to Bournemouth, we'd be all alone in third place still. That's why I don't understand why certain Villa fans are getting so unhinged at this moment, especially when you consider the predicament of our next opponent. This weird, ambiguous ownership situation where John Textor wants to sell his shares, about 70%. That creates uncertainty for a club, and we should be really grateful that we're not in that situation. Villa won both of its games coming out of the international breaks already this season, at home to Everton in crazy fashion and then away at Fulham. And then when you think about the loss at Selhurst Park at the end of last year, coupled with the EFL Cup loss a little earlier, I think Aston Villa may have a bee in its bonnet, and Crystal Palace better buckle up, because I think we're going to win this game and we're going to win it comfortably. And not helping Palace right now is their plight. They're in the relegation places after losing to Fulham at home this past weekend, and it's quite possible they will be without their three most important midfielders, Eze and Wharton through injury, and Kamada now through suspension. I hope you enjoyed today's show. These next 2 weeks are going to be very important for several players, a chance to rest, recover, reset mentally for those who are not involved in international football. And for me, these next 2 weeks represent the only chance that me and my family are going to have for our festive preparations, shall we say. We take Christmas seriously in this household. In fact, the next time you watch the show, the parlor tree will probably be up behind me. And please don't tell me it's too early. But the schedule is relentless after this window is over. Until next time, I hope you can be chillin' like a villain. And as always, up the mighty Villa!